Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, speakers, and colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are on the globe. My name is Jean d'Aragon, Senior Sustainable Development Expert at the UN Office for Sustainable Development, known as the UNOSD, based in Incheon, South Korea. I'm very pleased to welcome you for this fifth session of the Executive Training Course for Policymakers on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is organized by UNOSD, my office. Like previous years, the Executive Training Course is structured around the high-level political forum on sustainable development. Hence, this Executive Training Course focuses on the next HLPF that will take place in July 2021, where the discussions will revolve around sustainable and resilient recovery from the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Show the presentations and discussions on the HLPF, the Voluntary National Reviews, or VNRs, and a selection of Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, that will go under in-depth review during the HLPF next July. We hope that this training will help you understand better and prepare you to actively take part in the implementation and review process of the SDGs in your own countries. Perhaps you have followed the first sessions where we looked at the SDG 3 on good health and well-being, SDG 8 on decent work and economic growth, SDG 12 on responsible sustainable consumption and production, and SDG 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions. If you happen to have missed some of the previous sessions, you can still watch them, as we record all the sessions as we go, and we upload them on our website. I am told that you can even play the sessions afterwards and get captions in different languages. You should find the webpage address on the chat box. Tonight we will continue with the presentations and discussions on Goal 17 on partnerships. In fact, Goal 17 is a bit more complex than it appears here on the program. As expressed in the 2030 Agenda, it means to strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. I will now give the floor to Ms. Licia Saner Liu, Professor in Organization Development and Institutional Learning. For those who don't know Prof. Saner Liu already, please allow me to introduce her. Professor Liu is president of the Center for Socioeconomic Development, CSEND, based in Geneva. She has over 20 years of experience as advisor to government and international organizations on organizational development and reform of public administration. Professor Saner Liu was very much instrumental in organizing this training course, and she was also our guide with the course throughout the whole week, including today, as she will also act as the moderator of this last session. She will now introduce the speakers, who are scholars, professionals, and practitioners, who will share their valuable knowledge and experience with us tonight. She will also introduce the rules for tonight's session. Professor Saner Liu, Licia, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Licia, you're not unmuted.
Well, sorry for the oversight. Thank you, John. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon for everybody. Well, I'm very happy that we have been so far covered some of the key sectors that will be addressed during HLPF this year. And we are coming to the last one, which is equally difficult than the SDG-17 in its complexity and wide range of issues covered, and the scope of understanding needed in order to actually make these different means of implementation effective, and to help countries to scale up their different interventions in order to carry out and be successful with SDG activities. Let me just sort of share my screen very quickly in order to move forward, because I would like to sort of use the opportunity to address some of the issues. I will not say further about Dr. Aragon at this point, because he will come back to the session as the Master of Ceremony for the last segment of today, that is a closing ceremony. So let me just sort of say a few words about UN Office of for Sustainable Development, UNOSD, because I think it is important to know this is a very important resource that has been heavily put together. The mission is about facilitating the use of knowledge. So this is about translating knowledge, knowing to acting. So we hope this will be one of the objectives that we can achieve during today or during this week. The second thing is its specialization. It is specialized in mapping, assessing, and improving the exchange of knowledge resources. And also, as part of this program, the UNOSD also conduct research and capacity development. So let me just repeat once again the overall mandate of the executive training course. It is about transmitting, sharing of knowledge, skills, and tools. With the very limited time, we probably cannot be too ambitious, but I think to be aware and to know is the first step. So we hope that this will contribute positively toward this decade, which is very important in achieving the SDGs, to gear up and accelerate the delivery in this regard. So specifically about what is the overall learning objectives, since we are spending time together. So the first one is really about raising awareness. Second is about sharing information and experiences, and especially about tackling some of the linking issues which are very difficult to deal with. And we also wanted to have the little moment to hear reflections from countries, about their experience. And of course, overall, it is to contribute to the process of HLPF, the Voluntary National Review, so that these national review processes will become a dynamic input into the overall implementation process. Just wanted to share some rules of the participation, because due to the limitation, we would like to ask you support to use question and answer box for questions, and instead of the chat, because it will draw the attention of the host better. And the second thing we would really like to ask you is participation and support. Like during the previous days, we got many very valuable feedback and input in terms of how to organize such an online event learning process better and more effectively. So please, before you leave the session today, fill out the questionnaire. It's very quick. It's 7 questions. It will not take more than maximum 10 minutes. So thank you. And let me sort of switching my role and into my moderation role. For that, I need to change my slides. Oops. Sorry, I think, okay, now there we go. Today, the session is about SDG-17. It is about strengthening the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. Yesterday, we heard from Dr. Jean-Marie Cusa about the core of the SDG agenda. It is about addressing the issue of equity, and that without solidarity at different levels will not be possible. So today we wanted to talk about this in more detail. This is the topics that we will address. You could see that we will have 4 inputs from different distinguished speakers. And I will come back to that one by one later on. But I would like to sort of have a quick refresh about the SDG-17 itself. What does it mean by partnerships? We are looking at, some of the critical issues in terms of financing for development, the technology that need to be innovated, developed, and deployed and disseminated in order to address some of the very difficult pollution issues, for example. And building capacity is 17.9. And then it comes to trade. We have read enough reports to know without trade, without improved trade performance, that is very difficult to generate domestic resources for SDGs, especially in the lowest income countries. And there are systemic issues need to be addressed, as well as one specific target, which is addressing 2 specific targets actually addressing multi-stakeholder partnership, 17.16 and 17.17. And the last one, which is always there, but not so much highlighted, and without that, we cannot make better decisions than what we have already done most of the time today. So that's data monitoring and accountability, how to make our data more granular and also more sensitively disaggregated, so we could come forward with more targeted policy design and choices. So these are the key areas of SDG 17. And the parts to show that we will address the finance and the partnership itself. On the side, you could see some new publications which is available on the UN SDG knowledge platform. And I welcome you to have a close look, because it is a summary, it's a knowledge product trying to help to make the partnership, the solidarity, being not just talk about, but become an action and actually maintained also. Here, you could see on the same platform that I mentioned, there are some data. And I think it's worth noting that in terms of the overseas development system, and usually we call it the donor aid, it's actually, to actually rose by quite significant percentage. But also after the COVID-19, the implications, because we have seen over the last 15 to 20 years, not only about ODA is helping to transfer of resources from developed areas to developing areas, but the private transfer through remittance, it's already before 2020 was already surpassing the ODA in terms of total volume and amount. And also the third part, which we have not talked directly, but is also very important, is through the corporate social responsibility or other private philanthropic organizations transfer. So I think when we are talking about financing for sustainable development as well as partnership, we are talking about traditional actors and also many of the new actors who are increasingly difficult and increasingly important. One more piece about the knowledge already being accumulated is the current landscape. On the partnership platform hosted under UN DESA, you could see that in all the areas, this from 1 to SDG 17, they are registered many partnerships, and also altogether in total 5,367. This will be a good area to go in to look to find good practices, but at the same time to also identify challenges, and it's a rich ground for research, and I encourage you to go and visit. When we talk about partners, within the context of the UN system under the HLPF, we're talking about the following 10 groups that is organized in order to sort of to harness voice together so that can be more articulated and also better heard. And these are the partners that we should keep in mind when we think about structuring partnerships in the country or in the communities in order to advance the SDG agenda. Something important to note is that the business and industry under the auspice of the International Chamber of Commerce has already been accredited and then designated as official observer to the UNGA. That is really important development, and it's worth to note. So, what is the question that we need to think about when we come to the solidarity aspect and multi-stakeholder partnerships? It is not whether the idea of partnership is good or bad, but what types of partnership are most promising. Do we know this? And the second question is that we need to think about, we know that some partnerships has been sustainable and sustained and been impactful. But how are these partnerships designed and facilitated? Because partnership cannot stand alone and just say, you've been labeled as a partner group, as a partner community, and there you go. It's not going to happen. It needs to be carefully husbanded in order to move forward and reaching the common goal. So what are the conditions necessary need to be put in place so that this partnership can actually work? So these are the three questions that we want to keep in mind when we listen to today's conversation. And my last comment is to say the MSP can serve as a mechanism for groups to make decisions and take actions for the common good. And therefore, it is inevitable to see there's a conflict of interest. Question is, how do you overcome this conflict and to bring convergence? So there are shared values, shared visions, and shared benefits so that we can sort of reach not just local scale, but actually at the international scale. And if we look at the SDG declaration, it is a call for really the highest level of solidarity and partnership. And the second point I'd like to point out is that in order for multi-stakeholder partnership to be effective, this process needs to be considered issues of power, conflict, systemic change, and the social cognitive path involved in interaction and learning. And therefore, it is easy to talk partnership. It's actually quite hard to walk partnership. With this few comments, I would like to introduce the input by Ms. Lota Tatinen, who is in charge of the partnership within the UNDESA, and CSAN as an accredited member of this group. We have the honor and the pleasure to know her and work with her. So it is a great delight to introduce her for today's input. And Lota Tatinen, he is the Chief for Outreach and Partnerships Branch, Division of Sustainable Development Goals of the UNDESA. She has been working on this topic from the beginning when the discussion about SDG started. And she has over 20 years of experience in working with the UN systems, including several major global UN conferences and their follow-up processes, such as 2012 UN Conference on Sustainable Development, or Rio +20. And as you know, that the link between Rio Declaration, the Earth Summit, and SDGs are very intimate. And there's a research paper looking at this relationship. And the 2014 Samoa Conference on Small Island States, 2016 Global Sustainable Transport Conference, and the 2017 UN Ocean Conference. She also coordinates the engagement of stakeholders in the intergovernmental process that lead to the adoption of the 2030 agenda in 2015. So without further elaboration, I would invite Ms. Tatinen to give her a pre-recorded speech of the day.
Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to be here with you this morning or evening to talk to you about partnerships and how they can make a difference to our work in advancing sustainable development across the world. I had the great privilege of working directly with the General Assembly Open Working Group on Sustainable Development Goals that developed a set of proposals for the 17 SDGs that were adopted in 2015. In an organization that's not always known for its accessibility or transparency, this open working group became a prime example of an open and inclusive UN that engages with civil society, private sector, and other stakeholders. The group in the end consisted of all UN member states and had in-depth discussions with and tried to learn from experts from all walks of life. It engaged with distinguished representatives from the private sector, with top scientists from around the world, and also with active citizens who spoke on the needs for all those that were being left behind in our increasingly unequal world. While it was not always easy, we can now safely say that this inclusion of stakeholders in the negotiations was one of the great success factors of the SDG negotiation process. It provided the SDGs with the legitimacy of an open process, and it also paved the way for considering all stakeholders as active partners in SDG implementation. Partners with rights, but also responsibilities for taking action. This is the spirit that we need more than ever today, as our societies are striving to recover and overcome the challenges posed by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. We need government, private sector, the scientific and technological community, civil society, and other stakeholders working closely together, aligning their efforts, pooling their resources, including through multi-stakeholder partnerships. A recent survey that was circulated by our department, UNDESA, shows that new partnerships have been developed in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, in particular in areas of health, support for small business, access to IT, and education. 68% of the government respondents also perceived that the need for engaging stakeholders and developing partnerships would increase in response to the pandemic. At the same time, there were also concerns that stakeholders may be less able to effectively participate in implementation efforts, including as a result of growing capacity challenges. Moving ahead, it's clear that we need to double down on our efforts to invest in partnerships and also create an enabling ecosystem for partnerships at all levels, including fostering policies that are supportive of multi-stakeholder participation and collaboration for action. Secondly, ensuring that all actors and stakeholders have the necessary knowledge, skills, and capacities, including to partner in partnerships. Thirdly, we should also foster partnership engagement platforms at all levels that can bring actors together, catalyze new partnerships. And lastly, we also need to promote good practice standards for partnership building that are based on national ownership, mutual trust, transparency, accountability, and that are also aligned with national laws and development plans, and also with the UN Charter. Allow me now to reflect for a moment about what are the benefits and challenges of partnerships. When forged well, it's clear that partnerships can bring a myriad of benefits. For example, partnerships can help bring together complementary resources from different actors across different sectors. They can help share ideas and also risks. Partnerships can help create legitimacy and knowledge, as well as create mechanisms for shared learning and complex problem solving. While all partnerships are unique, of course, many effective partnerships share certain key characteristics. For example, for a true partnership to work, each partner or collaborator, contributor, must benefit from the collaboration. Secondly, a partnership journey should start with building an understanding of what is the overlapping interest among partners, which allows them to work together to build a shared strategic goal and vision for the work. This shared vision and goal will be crucial for the implementation of the partnership, even when partners are reaping different benefits from the collaboration. Thirdly, a partnership also importantly requires trust, and developing this trust may take time. For this reason, we often recommend starting small, testing the collaboration among partners with a manageable project that can help partners learn to understand each other and ways of working better. Fourth, it's also important to underline that partnership is a process, it's not a product. It's an activity, not an institution. Successful collaboration is always characterized by mutual commitment to working together to create, manage, develop the partnership as a continuously evolving relationship. There also needs to be flexibility in planning, which is a major reason why partnerships can often be resource intensive. It's important that partners commit substantial resources to managing a partnership. And also, there needs to be continuous monitoring and reviewing progress and adapting the partnership as it progresses. While effective partnerships can bring many benefits, it is clear that they also have certain challenges that we need to be realistic about. Too often, partnerships are expected to provide the resources for financing of sustainable development that they are not able to always provide. In some cases, partnerships are put together too hastily to answer a call, for example, of a UN conference. And while established with good intentions, sometimes such new partnerships are not sustainable or are not truly anchored in the national or local realities and the lives of the individuals that they are trying to enhance. So there really is a need to be strategic, take a strategic approach to partnership building, identify the gaps and challenges that require additional efforts, and finding the long-term partners that can best benefit from and contribute to a certain effort. I would now like to spend a few moments reflecting on the type of work we in DESA, in our Division for Sustainable Development Goals, do to support partnerships and partnership building. Our work is really centered around three key areas around partnerships. Firstly, we organize a number of high-level events to bring together different actors from different sectors, to convene these actors, create opportunities for knowledge sharing and for connecting them and creating opportunities for forging partnerships. Secondly, we collect data around partnerships and information and create analytical products and analysis. And lastly, we also do capacity building around partnerships. The main vehicle for our capacity building work at the country level for partnerships is the 2030 Agenda Partnership Accelerator, which is a collaborative initiative and project between our division, the UN Global Compact, the UN Office for Partnerships, the UN Development Coordination Office, and the Partnering Initiative think tank. Through this project, the 2030 Agenda Partnership Accelerator, we strive to build the skills of government officials, of resident coordinators of the United Nations and their teams, as well as different stakeholders around partnerships, so that they can also foster inclusive partnership platforms at the national level. For more information about our work, including the 2030 Partnership Accelerator project and the different analytical products, you can visit our website, which is sdgs.un.org. Another strand of work that DESA is doing that is helping create partnerships is the work to support the voluntary national reviews that member states are undertaking on their implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs, and that they are presenting to the high-level political forum at its annual July sessions. I know you have already spent some time during this course reflecting on different aspects of the VNR processes. I wanted to highlight in this context that these voluntary national reviews have become important vehicles for forging partnerships around SDGs. Recent research by our division indicates that the VNRs have been instrumental for sharing experiences, strengthening policies and institutions, and also mobilizing different stakeholders and partnerships at the country level around the SDGs. Evidence shows that about 75% of the VNR countries have included non-state actors in related governance mechanisms, such as high-level coordination or advisory bodies, technical committees, or working groups. Colleagues, last October, over 1 million people took part in a global consultation that was organized as the UN celebrated its 75th anniversary. 60% of the respondents believed that the UN has made the world a better place, and 74% of them considered that the UN is essential to tackling global challenges in the future. However, it's clear that the UN cannot do these goals alone. In this decade of action for the SDGs, let us join forces globally, regionally, and locally with all partners and stakeholders so that we can achieve our shared vision for a future that is more equal, sustainable, and safe for all. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Even though Lotta won't be here to hear our appreciation, but we will convey definitely to her via email. And next, I would like to, to summarize briefly and introduce a new idea. And if I could share my content before I share my content now, and I also would introduce the next speaker. And I think, one of the things which I stressed before in my earlier remark, to say that partnerships need to be nurtured, taken care of, to be sort of steered. And I think, you just have seen a perfect example in terms of her work in this area. But to put into more sort of a conceptual framework, I wanted to quote Professor Jeffrey Meads, and in his very interesting paper, talking about collaborative governance of the partnership. So I think the collaborative governance consists, according to his research finding, the 5 elements. And this work also has been bared by a very important group in the US, centered around Stanford, looking looking at collective impact. And what the finding of this is corroborated with their proposal. It's the governance need to have the following 5 functions. One is about information sharing. The second is about consultation amongst the peers, and also with the the resource group or experts. And then involvement of different stakeholders are very critical because you don't want to miss any voices. And of course, partnership is part of the deal, and empowerment of the different potential actors, especially in this context, marginal groups. So we are talking about a new forms of governance that is coming to support multi-stakeholder partnerships. Without that, partnerships would remain empty and without fulfilling its promise. And in that, I would like to introduce the next topic for today and the speaker. The next topic is actually looking at what international organizations such as Food and Agriculture Organization has learned from its years of working together with different stakeholders, with different communities in different countries and circumstances, summarized into a partnership framework as a way to capture what they have learned and in order to share and to also standardize future operation. So this is a new publication looking at FAO strategy for partnerships with the private sector and as CSOs. The person who will be speaking on this topic and share with us some concrete examples will be Mr. Ahmad Mukhtar. Mr. Mukhtar is a senior economist working at FAOs, and he specialized in international trade and related issues. And actually, this is where the context that we have known his work for many years. Previously, he worked with the UNCTAD and UNDP and as a negotiator in the WTO on behalf of Pakistan. So he has degrees in economics, law, public policy, finance, and biotechnology. That is a very unusual link. So with these few words, I want to welcome Ahmed. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Richard, and a very good morning, afternoon, and evening to all of the participants and panelists. Let me try to share my screen. So I'm trying to find the presentation if I could.
Ahmad, it's at the bottom. Do you see it says, oh, okay, I think you
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Okay, because we are using the double screens and sometimes it's not really that friendly. Can you see the slideshow now?
You can enlarge it, yeah. Okay.
I think now that's fine, isn't it? Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to UNOSD and Alicia for inviting. So let me just go to the first slide. I think most of the participants would be familiar with the Food and Agriculture Organization. It is one of the specialized agencies of the United Nations with 194 members headquartered in Rome, but with a very good field presence in 130 countries. So let me directly go to the private sector partnerships or partnerships in general. So a simple question could be that why do you want to partner? And the simplest reply would be why not? Because private sector is an integral part of the economy and society. But more importantly, for the global agri-food systems, particularly in the context of 2030 agenda, not only for the SDG 2, but for many other SDGs, with cross-cutting linkages with the SDGs 3, 5, 12, and 17 for sure, but with SDG 14 specifically. Now, private sector for us is a strategic development partner. Why? Because we can pool our knowledge and resources with the private sector to identify and implement solutions. And that is the starting point. Now, in terms of scoping the private sector, that for us, private sector is a broad scope. not only the farmers and farmer organizations, but small businesses, the large businesses, financial institutions, industry, trade, and other associations and consortiums, and including the philanthropic foundations and relevant and the related institutions. Now, based on that, very recently we have revised our partnership strategy. So this 2021 to 25 FAO strategy for private sector engagement is basically a forward-looking vision for for strengthening the strategic partnership with the private sector, particularly to achieve the SDGs. That is the topic for today. Now, what this strategy will bring is the impactful and innovative engagements with the private sector that contributes to the aspiration of leaving no one behind, as you know, the mantra for most of the UN agencies. But in order to have the inclusive, resilient, and sustainable food systems by 4 pillars, which are the 4 pillars of our strategic framework now. First, better production. Second, better nutrition. Third, better environment. And fourth, a better life. So we need partnerships with the private sector and civil society. And there are 3 guiding pillars for this new strategy of partnership. First, we have to connect. We have to connect with this broad spectrum of the private sector partners through a proactive approach to outreach and engage with a variety of partners. Secondly, we have to support through the transparent mechanisms and to diffuse the business models for partnership building that actually would be sustainable, because we have to sustain not just the partnerships, but the impact for these partnerships in order to scale up at the global level, because most of the partnerships could be quite specific at the country level or even sub-regional levels. Now, this is a new approach of our partnership. Traditionally, not only with our organization, but probably with many others, the partnerships used to take form of the policy dialogues, the capacity development, technical cooperation, resource mobilization, advocacy, and communications, the traditional tools. We are not doing away with that one. I mean, that could continue. But what we are focusing now as a novel approach is to start with innovation. We need to innovate the way we engage, the way we deliver, and the way we create impact along with our partners. Another point which Lichi also mentioned at the beginning is the data sharing and dissemination. Now, we as Technical Agency on Food and Agriculture, but many other development partners and UN agencies are sitting on the minds of the data. But unless we share, unless we tailor that and share and disseminate, this may not be of any use. So that is our core to engage with the partners through data sharing and dissemination. And then supporting them for financing and investment by mobilizing these, means of implementation, as we say in the SDG and Agenda 2030 context. But most importantly, all of these partnerships have to be aligned with the SDGs so that we have a collective effort to achieve the SDGs. We know that we are lagging behind, particularly in the SDGs where FAO is relevant or FAO is custodian in a way, for example, SDG 2. And then each and every step of these partnerships or results should be the SDG advocacy at the global level. So that is the new approach that we are adopting, keeping the tradition as a core, but trying to find the new ways for new partnerships. Now, I'll give you a few examples of those partnerships. Of course, there are plenty because we engage, as I mentioned, at the country level, at the regional level, and some of the global levels. But let me share 3 specific examples. First, at the country level, which we did very recently with a private sector enterprise in Rwanda. So we are developing, basically, still going on, a youth-led agriculture enterprises, or supporting to develop the youth-led agriculture enterprises by providing the equity funds through our collaborator, which is a private company called JR Farms. So it is basically a green agribusiness fund to the selected agribusiness youth or agripreneurs in order to have their role played in the different agri-food value chains. So it is essentially bringing the young agripreneurs by giving them not only the equity support, but by providing them training and capacity building opportunities, and then sharing with them the knowledge and best practices from across the world through our data and knowledge resources so that basically they become, the leaders of or champions of change. And now, youth, not only that one has to focus on the youth and women, but in agriculture in particularly, there is a value in that, because youth not only is a future in literal sense, but they have to fill this gap of innovation or the yields or the productivity or the so-called gaps in the growth in agriculture. Why? Because the traditional farmers or the traditional even corporate farmers are more or less mature in their thinking and mindset. But if you would have fresh minds in terms of youth entrepreneurs, they can actually bring up they can fill these gaps which I mentioned. Now, this partnership in particular was a result of an outcome of the African Regional Conference on Youth Employment that was held in 2018, which was organized by FAO, African Union, and the government of Rwanda. So what we did is that we took one of the outcomes. I mean, it was not just a discussion shop, as some people say, but we took a discussion result and put that into action. Now, this partnership is going well and has a scaling opportunity. Why? Because this also contributes to a broad multi-country FAO efforts or projects in countries, even in other continents such as Guatemala in Latin America, in the neighboring countries like Kenya, Senegal, and Uganda. So this has become a beacon of light for promoting the young agripreneurs through partnership with the private sector. Let me move to the second example, which is a regional or at a broader level in the Mesoamerican region. Now, the challenge in that region is that, of course, I mean, there has been a lot of progress in reducing the hunger or eradicating hunger, but still there are roughly 11 million undernourished people in Mesoamerican countries. And this undernourishment or undernutrition coexists with the increasing rate of overweight and obesity. So it's basically a double-edged sword of malnutrition. So that is one challenge. Now, the most another complication in this challenge is that this hunger is especially prevalent in the indigenous and the rural indigenous communities and rural areas, which normally, as you know, may not be at the limelight or the forefront of the government interventions in those countries. And then there is often a lack, as I mentioned, of effective and sufficiently funded public policies for these regions that would be specifically targeting the smallholder farmers, particularly in rural areas. And in general, we know that the smallholder farmers or subsistence farmers have limited access to extension services and markets. So it's quite a complex and a big challenge, I would say. But what did we come up with as a solution? We partnered with the Mexican Agency for International Development Cooperation, like many other development agencies, to basically start a Mesoamerica hunger-free program under the South-South Cooperation Program. Now, that is an example to be shared is that in most of the development interventions or partnerships at a multilateral level, we do not necessarily need the big or the rich development partners of the North, because this is one of the good examples. So since 2015, under the South-South and Triangular Cooperation, we are facilitating this support through two channels. First, there is a specialized and demand-driven component of the program that allows the mobility of the Mexican expertise to meet the technical cooperation need in other Mesoamerican countries. And then we basically convene the policy dialogues, peer-to-peer exchange of experiences, the capacity development activities at different regional and sub-regional levels for these beneficiary countries, with the constituencies such as the policymakers, lawmakers, and technical teams. Now, through this regional or Mesoamerican hunger-free program, what we are doing is also providing technical assistance to lawmakers and the ministries of agriculture, ministries of social welfare and education in the 9 target countries. Why? So that they are enabled or they have the capacity to develop the legal instruments, legal and regulatory instruments, to develop and implement the public policies that are focused to achieve food security and nutrition for these targeted rural and indigenous communities. So now, what are the results of this partnership? Quite interesting, I would say, because it needs a lot of innovation and resources, but not really much of the financial resources, but look at some of the results that I'm sharing. We have organized 25 public policy processes and 21 legislative processes supported in 9 countries. We have strengthened the capacities of the members of Parliamentary Front Against Hunger. This is a regional parliamentary alliance in the Mesoamerican countries. We also have developed a catalog for existing legislation in these countries on issues related to food security and nutrition, and it is available online. We have supported the development of national strategies and databases to register family farmers developed in the Costa Rica, Guatemala, Panama, and Dominican Republic, and hopefully in some other countries fairly soon. And the rural territorial development processes were strengthened in 51 territories in 9 countries. So all of that until now is the result of the South-South cooperation and triangular. I cannot go into details of this one, but this is one of the examples of unconventional partnerships with innovative ways of delivery. So that is why this is worth mentioning. Now, there is another example. I'll try to play a video if it works. This is an initiative that our forestry division did with the under the South-South and Triangular Cooperation with support from the Global Environment Facility, under the, I'm sure you're aware of the Global Environment Facility funding. So let's see this video of a couple of minutes that basically mentions about this sustainable forest management and the program on dry land sustainable landscape. I hope technology does not defeat us, but if you just give me a couple of minutes to play this video. I think we need much more partnership with Google and other companies now. So that
Ahmed, can I request also while we're waiting to take away this little gray box blocking your screen?
I don't see that, Licia, but I think it might be due to my computer. I don't see anything on my screen.
Okay.
But I saw that before as well because I think it's some problem with the bandwidth.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is this coming?
Well, it is loading. If it doesn't for next 10 seconds, then I'll just move on. Sorry for keeping you waiting. But this was quite an interesting video. That's why I thought.
Maybe you can put the link in the chat box so later on later on we can follow up.
Okay, absolutely.
Make it
That's
available.
fine. Yes, thank you. I'll do that. So I'll try to move now to the next slide, only if it allows me, because it looks like my screen is stuck. Sorry for that. I'm trying to move to the next slide now.
Okay. If not, we will ask our colleague at the UNOSD to help out.
Yes, I don't know if we could move from their side. Yeah, I think we have moved, isn't it?
Yeah, we moved.
Yeah, okay. So I'll try to close in next couple of minutes. Now, I think I have covered most of these points that when we engage with the private sector, why do we do that? Because first we have to leverage the food systems agenda because we cannot and no one can achieve it alone. But then it basically, the partnerships scale up the science, technology, and innovation to achieve the SDGs. These partnerships are for encouraging and ensuring the healthy diets and eradicate all forms of malnutrition. It basically, no, it is going double. It eliminates, it facilitates more and better investment in food and agricultural value chains, and it promotes rural development, eradicate poverty, and so on and so forth. And of course, in the end, addressing the food and water crisis. I'm just running through these slides due to the time. In terms of the civil society organizations, particularly the NGOs, as we say, although when we say private sector, it includes that as well. But our engagement with the CSOs in particular is basically to support them with the technical and institutional support in scaling up of successful approaches that they are opting to benefit the poor and having the food security and all of the efforts, but then giving them access to information and government through our platforms and for the decision-making bodies. And then giving them a platform for the greater influence on public policy, service delivery, finance, and human resources development, and in the end, improve mobilization for resources for food security. So I'll stop here, and then we can discuss further in the question and answer session. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Ahmed, for, I'm sorry to rushing you through, but it's, those two examples are very rich. And I also like to ask you to make a comment, because we heard in the second day when we deal with the youth employment, young people feel like agriculture really is not something or some sector to be. And here you talked about the agripreneurs, and I thought that was a very interesting idea, and link that to the decent work conditions in the agriculture sector. Could you say a few more words about that? Because I think agriculture is such an important sector. It links to so many different SDGs as contributors or sometimes as inhibitors to some of SDGs. So please, could you give us your thought?
Thank you very much, Lichia. Yes, it is an extremely important point, because when we say that we want to engage youth or encourage youth in the agriculture or encourage the agripreneurs, this is not just from the employment perspective. That is one, and extremely important. And in fact, there is an evidence that whenever we had crisis for the current crisis, we still have to gather the evidence. But let's go back to 2008-9 financial and relatively economic crisis as well. What we saw that even in the developed countries in Southern and Eastern Europe, most of the unemployed people actually went back to farms, because that was much better option. Now, in the developing countries in particular, let's say in Asia and Africa, what is going to happen in the next decades is that as there is a gap, or there is a need for the yield improvement, for the productivity improvement, because we have limited resources in terms of the land and water for the agriculture or the input. So the only option is that we have to have fresh mindset. We have to have these, agripreneurs who would basically do this innovation into that one. And the third segment for that is that in the developing countries in particular, what we miss is that we miss these intermediary businesses in agriculture. Those intermediary businesses could be providing the input services, for example, an Uber for agriculture, one of the models. Or they could be at the final end of filling these market gaps, rather than having the wholesalers and stockists getting all of that share. They can connect, for example, farmers to consumers through efficient intermediaries, through the deployment of the technologies and e-commerce and so on and so forth. And all of these things have started happening. So it is our guess, and more so a belief as well, that in coming years, youth will be much more attracted to agriculture, not only from employment, but from a business perspective as well, because that would make a perfect business sense for that. And in the end, of course, all in all, as you mentioned, this will contribute to a multiple number of SDGs once we have this culture of agripreneurs across the world.
Well, thank you. That's really a great vision to end this segment, because I would love to discuss further with you on this point, because I think we generally has a perception that to work in agriculture is dirty, hard, and little payoff, and doesn't really require much knowledge or technology or science. But actually, the modern agriculture is the opposite, and especially when you talked about agriculture-related services, I think this is really where a lot could be done, need to be done, in order to help countries who are relying primarily agriculture as the economic driver to move forward. So we will have a follow-on conversation at another time on this. So thank you very much, Ahmed, for giving us your insight. And before I introduce the next topic, I would say a few words, and I want to stress the importance of the framework that you just mentioned. If you look at this particular chart, which was published within the Sustainable Development Report, and which is led by Professor Jeffrey Sachs and also in partnership with Bertelsmann in Germany. If you look at the last one, which I framed with red, you could see that in most regions of the world, the partnerships as a goal, and also related targets are mostly either stagnating or not moving or even deteriorating. Except in the areas of Latin America and the Caribbean, we see an upward trend, and also other places. Okay, Sub-Sahara Africa is making some progress, as well as high-income countries. So I want to highlight the importance of having, synthesize a roadmap. How do we make partnership work, and what are the ingredients and the conditions from different specialized agencies? Because these agencies has been working on this topic for a very long time. And of course, civil societies also need to learn how to play a role. So I thank you for giving us this opportunity to hear the experiences from FAO on this important topic, and also this effort of putting out a standard, a framework to guide the process, at least within the agriculture sector, but might have some other spillover effect. With these few words, I would like to introduce the next topic, which is equally important and equally difficult, because it's really looking about financing for 2030 agenda. And we had made agreement, we as a global society, as nations, have come together at Addis Ababa and signed and declared a common action plan, which is called Addis Ababa Action Agenda. And since then, let's see what has happened in terms of pulling resources together in order to achieve common objective, which is the shared survival of our planet. The speaker on this topic is Professor Raymond Sander. He's a professor on organization and international management, Basel University. He also teaches at the Nuremberg University on environmental negotiations. His research project focuses on sustainable development, international relations, trade, and public administration. He's a co-founder of CSAND, a Geneva-based NGRDO, and accredited by ECOSOC since 2000. And Raymond Sander is also very active academically as a reviewer of management journals and authors of books and articles. He's on the Advisory Council of Academy of Management to Board of Governors from 2000 to 2002. Currently, he represents the UN in Geneva for the International Association of Applied Psychology. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Raymond, because we're running out of time. So I would just highlight the first point, saying the ODA for capacity building has been stable. So hopefully the COVID is not going to affect that much. And the trade, in terms of LDC's share of world merchandise export, unfortunately has fell, and therefore it further reduces the domestic resource, and creating greater constraint. And the last one, I would like to say that in terms of international solidarity expressed through the official development assistance, this has been dropping. Nevertheless, it has been picked up in the private and philanthropic sector. So with these few words, I would now ask Raymond to share with us his presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Lija, for your kind introduction. I'm trying to put up my slides. I'm not sure whether they're visible. Are they visible?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. We're now focusing on SDG-17, as you already heard from the previous speakers. It's a very important and also a very difficult topic. I will focus on some of the aspects of financing. I also, in that sense, I'm a bridge to the next speaker who will be more specific and will look at the ESG component of investment. But let me start briefly with the following. When we look at the SDGs, there's an understanding for what to do about making sure that these SDG goals will actually become successfully implemented. So you see here in different colors, there are 5 areas where one can see where investment is needed to make sure that there is an implementation, first in terms of basic needs, about hunger, no poverty, clean water. These are all what's categorized under basic needs. We have also empowerment, how to support participation of different parts of our society. And you have there, for instance, to reduce inequalities, gender equality, quality of education, grouped under the heading of empowerment. Climate change, what to do about preventing catastrophic warming of our atmosphere and of our climate. There are specific things that can be done. Investments are needed for it. And then we have also natural capital, our land, our oceans, what can be done to prevent overfishing, as an example. And finally, the governance part, how to think of organizing at the national level our governments at national, subnational, local level, but also at the international level, how to rethink cooperation between the different countries and the international organizations, so they're complementary and they can support the achievement of the SDGs. So, talking about infrastructure investments, distinctions are here being made, for instance, based on physical infrastructure, energy, key point energy, right? Basically, ideally, renewable energy, not energy that adds to the depletion of our natural resources, transportation, telecom, and water. We have social infrastructure investment needed about our health systems, schools, education, social services. We also need political infrastructure in the sense of our administrations, how they function, laws that are appropriate and effective, and also institutions. We talked about that yesterday. That's SDG 16. Finally, also the security infrastructure, our armed forces, police, the prison systems. There are plenty of reasons to invest in these different forms of infrastructures. However, now with COVID, we have a similar situation as is depicted here on the famous painting by Dali, the melting clock, meaning, as you probably all experience, weekdays become melted into weekend days. Work seems to not stop anymore or even extend into later hours of the day. It's becoming more difficult in the sense of planning, of having linear, forward-looking investment plans, because everything seems to just melt into a pot of multitudes of different needs and different approaches. So the planning for investment infrastructure has taken on that particular psychological challenge of being able to again separate our current conditions of survival from taking a look at how to plan in a linear, forward-looking manner. And we need money. It's already been in 2014, studies by UNCTAD showed that the amount of money needed to fulfill and achieve these investments in infrastructures, there was a gap estimated at 2.5 trillion US dollars per year. Now that's for the whole globe, the family of countries. Now with COVID-19, the pandemic, of course, there has been an enormous impact, developed or developing countries, but worst of all, particularly for the developing countries. The supply chains, value chains were broken, incomes lost, unemployment has increased. We have now to do still the same challenge of trying to build the future, but the means have decreased, and what to do about that. So we should ask ourselves what to do about how to invest in infrastructure. We have here on this chart, you see basically different options. Countries could opt for doing things traditionally by the government in place. The government does build, let's say, a road, finances it, has a public enterprises to build the roads, and it's done by the government. Or it could be done through procurement. Tenders are put out and private sector companies apply and submit bids to do the different infrastructure developments that the government, of course, the state would pay for it, but would no longer be directly implementing such infrastructure development. We have also the option to go through public-private partnerships, and I say a bit more about this shortly. We could also think of concessions. Concession is a form of public-private partnership that you have probably all experienced to some extent when you drive on roads, say in France or in Italy, the highways which were built by private companies who have then the right for a limited amount of years to collect fees from the people, the cars that use their these newly built highways to recuperate some of their investment, as well as, of course, also to make some profit on the investment that they made in the different countries. Or we could see the government and the countries opt to privatize, which would be another way to then maybe generate income by selling public enterprises. And the question, of course, is would the privatized entity deliver in terms of efficient, effective, and services that are expected from a newly privatized company. So here I'm summarizing the policy options about financing the SDGs and financing the future. We could have the government is doing most of it, as it has in many countries been done in the past, and it's still very much the case in the Scandinavian countries. But in order to actually finance and then implement infrastructure development, of course, the government has to have revenues, has to have finances, and that will come normally through taxes or tariffs. And if the taxes are very low and are not even collected, in some countries, tax collection doesn't function for various reasons. There's no money available for governments to build and to do the infrastructure development that's needed. Then PPPs, I mentioned that already before. Do we have governments that are competent in negotiating with private sector companies a fair but also effective form of partnership? Do the different ministries who are meant to then implement or accompany and be partnering with a private sector company, do they know what the PPP laws, contracts are all about? Privatization I mentioned before. And lastly, I'd like to say in our discussions with PPPs, in the past, there used to be the saying, it should be value for money, meaning the private sector company that engages in partnerships wants to be sure it doesn't lose money, which is understandable. But at the same time now, we have moved into the SDGs, into a more comprehensive understanding of what our society and our countries are all about. We are now also asking for value for money for the company and value for society. It should generate benefits for both, it should be inclusive. And other colleagues have now also added to it value for future generations, which is very true in addition, because here, if we build a road or if we build some port facilities or whatever, some of these projects last 20 years or 30 years, which means if there is debt that's been accumulated by the government, then it has to be paid back. So the payback to commitments done today by our government for infrastructure development, well, the next generation has to pay up. So we should also think, will this be useful for the future generation? And hence, we should find a way to include the representative, the young, when we make major decisions about infrastructure development. Here you see a list of different kinds of PPPs. Most of you, most likely, do not know the difference between these different kinds of PPPs. And it's not going to be a lecture about that, but I just wanted to highlight there are complexities with PPPs, which means contractual, legally, financially, the risks, sometimes more with the private sector, sometimes more with the government. All this needs to be understood, and we need to have competent government officials who can deal and partner with the private sector, so whatever they agree to do will be beneficial in terms of the 3 V's I showed you just before: value for money and society, but also value for money for the future generations. Then investment and going about business. We also should take into consideration there are rules or guidelines how to be, in that sense, a good private sector company. We have had long discussions at the UN level in different countries because of problems that occurred in terms of violation of human rights, as an example. So here came, for instance, at the OECD level, we have very good responsible business conduct guidelines. They now have gone to the 4th revision. They cover not only human rights violations or the possibility of human rights violations, but they are quite comprehensive. They also look at corruption, bribery. They look at consumer interests, science and technology. But this is a non-binding agreement which has become soft law because countries have accepted some responsibility to make sure that these guidelines in their countries, if they have signed up to it, are being implemented and respected. Then we have the UN Guiding Principles for Business and Human Rights, which were signed by all the member countries of the United Nations. It goes back to 2014. Very good instrument. Some countries now try to build on it and add a more binding and remedial parts to this non-binding, at this point, non-binding principles. We have also the ILO, which looks at their own multinational enterprise guidelines, but focusing mostly on labor rights, and it's also non-binding. And finally, there's a new initiative which has been going on for a few years now to try at the UN level to create a binding treaty which would help companies get directives, guidelines as to what is expected of them, so they could be a reliable partner in the future and when they conduct their partnerships with government and society in terms of infrastructure development. Well, we have to think about what's going on right now, of course, with COVID. As I mentioned before, unemployment has soared. In many of our countries, it's very high. Developing countries, we talk less about the developing countries and focus more on the developed countries because partially just simply because the statistics are available and we know much more about the high unemployment figures there. But in developing countries and least developed countries, we know the situation is dire. It's very difficult. So what can we do in order to help bring about a change where jobs can be created, which of course also means we need to have money to do this. In regards to COVID and the pandemic, I have a list of a few things that could be considered. One is to think about a basic income scheme for those who are unemployed due to the pandemic until the economy picks up and they don't need that support. We can think about supporting small and medium-sized enterprises to avoid that they go bankrupt and close. We could also think about support for those so-called essential workers, meaning basically the people who are working in, to some extent, risky environments at the supermarket where they're in contact with other people and where their risk of being infected is very high. How can we help them? Because their job is very stressful. If we need more hospital beds in case of a third wave, or even maybe a fourth wave coming, how do we create sufficient hospital beds? How do we work together with the private sector health facilities? How do we make a deal with them to take care of the people who end up being very much affected by the COVID-19? We need to find ways to provide shelter, food for those who are left out because of the COVID impact of COVID-19. And we could also help young people who are ICT competent, who could help older people who are now stuck at home and cannot, in that sense, use the internet to buy food, to stay in touch with others, how to then help them become, in that sense, digitally savvy, or maybe not savvy, but just sufficiently linked so they can retain some form of autonomy in terms of their own, how they live their lives. We also should help the teachers, the assistants, to have, if the kids can no longer go to school again because of heavy lockdowns, we need maybe to have more teaching staff or supporting assistants to attend to the kids, especially in families where the access to computers and the knowledge how to manage them is limited. And finally, when it comes to vaccination, of course, we should also consider maybe to produce the vaccines in other countries, other than the countries where we have the big pharmaceutical competence, the companies who produce them. And as we already know now, the production is not up to speed. And we should not forget that the majority of people in developing countries, they live in developing countries, do not have access to the vaccines. And if they're not vaccinated, they will be infected and the infection will come back to the countries which at the moment benefit from vaccines. So in closing, I'd just like to say, it is time for us all to rediscuss the public goods, the whole question as to what should we do about air, water, land, institutions. This is common goods to a large extent. It's not a privatized issue for a company to take care of that. We should think about an overall umbrella discussion as to what should we do about safeguarding our public goods so they don't get to be depleted, wasted, in terms of assuring the survival of the next generation. It's high time to rediscuss public goods. I give you an example. In my own country, in Switzerland, in the 100 years ago, it was still very much the case where some of the villagers who needed water from the glaciers, they built these canals here on wooden planks. They're called the Bies in the canton of Valais. They're the villagers together and were enterprising to build these channels and to take care of forests. That's what Elinor Ostrom, she got the Nobel Prize discussing what other alternatives we have to organize ourselves in order to provide the essentials, such as here, water or forest for our survival. I'm closing to say our next speaker, a dear colleague, he will also discuss ESGs. There are things to be positive about. Even the investment community is aware of the challenges caused by all these issues such as climate change, COVID. There are things that the private sector could contribute to help us all look for solutions that could be beneficial for all of us. That brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Professor Sena. Thank you, Remo. I'm sort of conscious that we're running over time. However, perhaps one question could be addressed in this context, because you proposed a long list of possible solutions. And I just wonder, what's your thought for countries that have a really large percentage of population in the informal sector, and there is a general lack, even for the formal sector, there is a general lack of social protection. And so in this context, for the people that facing the challenge of COVID, what do you think the role of public procurement could play in terms of encouraging so more private-public partnership related provision of goods and services?
Public procurement could be organized in a way that the call for instance, companies to participate in procurement emphasizes not just value for money, efficiency in terms of the cost side, but it should also be focusing on the effectiveness side of what they want to do in terms of infrastructure development. That the whole call is structured so what is going to be done will be also green, so to speak, will become also a multi-sector focus, not just cost-efficient road that is being built, but something that also will be mindful and fitting with a green agenda. So from that point of view, a public procurement could greatly direct traffic, so to speak, as to where we go and what we plan to build. I would also like to conclude by saying there are different ways to organize ourselves from a financial and also from a management point of view. I have left out saying anything, for instance, about cooperatives. Cooperatives in many of our European countries, for instance, but also in other countries, can be a formidable member of the economy. From 13 up to 15% of GDP is generated by cooperatives. So the picture I gave you about the people in the villages up in the Alps, they're a form of a local cooperative where everybody is participating, getting water safely to the village, but they're also co-owners of this undertaking. So different forms of ownership, of participation are available already today, or maybe others could be explored. We can be also innovative in terms of how we generate and how we organize our economy and our society.
Well, thank you. I have to stop it here because I think we opened up more questions in terms of how this partnership could mean at different level. So I just wanted to emphasize, one and introduce our next speaker, in the sense that you highlighted that we have to think about the society as a whole. As a member of society, what value do we bring? And also future for future generations. And that is a very important reminder. I have a chart and I welcome you all to go later on to the recording, to the website to look, because it is based on a study done in Canada by the Canadian government in 2019, trying to see what are some of the business are already doing. So business in our vocabulary is not just the bad guy, but business also need to be encouraged and supported, and some of them to do good, and then while doing well. And some of them already find a much larger inclusive purpose in their undertaking. So you could see there are different levels of engagement by the business. And it is a very positive development, because without creating wealth, it is impossible to achieve equity and also well-being for all. With this note, I wanted to introduce Mr. Ziad Alexander Hayek, because he is a man who has been in the financial sector from different sides of the spectrum, from private to public and to governance. And he's also presently the president of the World Association of Public-Private Partnership. He has been besides that, he also has a regulatory consultative role in the Bureau of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe Working Party on PPP. He has managed large organizations, a lot of them financial, but also public institutions for 40 years in investment banking, international finance, corporate strategy, corporate governance, public policy, emerging markets, and economic development. What I would like to ask Ziad to make a presentation to look at, why should PPP practitioners need to keep ESG, while PPP has been highlighted and championed as a good solution in terms of the current crunch in terms of resource mobilization and the large deficit of different forms of infrastructure, which Raymond already mentioned. So the floor is yours, Ziad, please.
Thank you very much, Licia. Thank you for this kind introduction. I'll try to share my screen. There we go. Hopefully it's all working now. I don't know if you can see me. Can you see my screen? Is that okay?
Yeah, we see you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, well, before I talk about ESG, I'd like to say that, another way of looking about the SDGs that we always talk about is the 5 Ps. So we have people, taking care of people, of their well-being, their standard of living. Planet, which is taking care of our environment and the planet we live on. Peace, because without peace, there is no economic development. Partner and prosperity, which is what we aim to do in order to be able to have a better standard of living for everybody. So we have people, planet, prosperity, and peace. And the thing that ties all of these together, I think, is the 5th P, which is partnership. And partnership is important because it is the means to an aim. And that's why SDG number 17, unlike all the other SDGs, is not an objective by itself, although it is classified as such, but it is a tool, it is a means of getting there. And when we talk about PPP within the context of partnerships, it is something that has existed for a long time. This has existed under different names from the times of the Phoenicians and Romans, including all the empires that came, between then and now. But in its modern form, the way it started, and it started taking shape and started becoming more structured and started becoming a profession and a specialty. And this is why we created the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals. One of its aims is to continue to foster that profession and to implement and share best practices around the world. PPP was seen as a tool for procurement. It was a way for governments to build infrastructure and finance infrastructure by having recourse to the private sector to do that. But more and more, we see PPP not as a tool for procurement, but as a tool for development. It's a tool for achieving the SDGs. Now, I move on to ESG. And in ESG, it's a concept that started with the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan when he wrote to 50 CEOs of major financial institutions to come together and form a compact around applying the environmental, social, and governance best practices to their businesses, to their investments, to the capital markets. The idea being that businesses should be looking at doing something good for society. Trying to move my screen. Not able to. So the E in ESG is environmental criteria. That means it affects our use of energy, the waste it discharges, and all the waste that affects our planet. It includes carbon emissions and climate change. The S is social criteria. It addresses relationships of an organization and reputation it fosters with people. It's really about labor relations, diversity, inclusion, involving women, involving youth, involving, looking at social safety nets in public decision-making and public policies. And governance is the internal system of practices, controls, and procedures, because if you are trying to do something that requires, especially for public arena, it requires transparency, it requires efficiency, and in order to have transparency and efficiency, you need to have good governance. So, what did businesses do about this? Well, businesses came around and said, yes, that makes a lot of sense, and they started implementing in many parts of the world the principles of ESG. Each is implementing it in their own way, and there's a lot of efforts to, either through the Global Compact of the United Nations or other means to share information and to share best practices. And I will talk more about this a bit later on. But the governance factor is the factor that has attracted most attention because, businesses are always, especially large corporations and large organizations, are looking for ways to better manage themselves. More and more environmental and social factors are gaining acceptance, especially environmental factors, as we see that there's a lot of push nowadays to do the right thing in ways that affect climate change. But there's a lot still needed to be done in terms of waste management, and other issues that are not necessarily directly related to climate. The equity world, also in the stock exchanges, have taken on to ESG, perhaps more so than the debt world. And I will talk about this a bit later on. And portfolio managers and analysts are now more frequently integrating ESG into investment processes. So we can see that, for example, Amundi, which is the largest asset manager in Europe, has decided to screen all its investments to be ESG compliant. We can see that BlackRock, which is an entity that manages more than $6 trillion of assets under management, also has said, its CEO has said that starting next year, they would like to see most of their investments to be ESG compliant, including, no longer investing in any energy generation capacity that is fossil fuel related, coal or gas or diesel or fuel or otherwise. And so really moving towards renewable energy. So we're seeing companies and investment managers really taking this very seriously. Why are they taking it seriously? It's because there's a shift happening in society. So now, if we look at millennials, which is the generation that is today starting to make financial decisions, these are the young people that are now taking over from their parents, from the baby boomers and from the Gen Xers. 84% of millennials are interested in sustainable investing, and $30 trillion are being transferred now currently from one generation to the other. So these millennials, 84% of whom believe in sustainable investing and in environment, in doing things good for the environment, etc., they are getting $30 trillion transferred to them to make decisions on. And this is why fund managers are paying a lot of attention to this. But as they started paying attention to this, they realized that they don't need to do it only for the sake of pleasing their customers. They realize that this is good for them. And so we see a huge shift in the major markets around the world by long-term investors. And by that, I mean mutual funds, pension funds, insurance companies, and sovereign wealth funds to adopt these principles. Long-term investors are not in and out every day. They're not trading the market. They have portfolios that they need to invest for annuities, for retirement funds, for pension plans, etc. So these are long-term investments, and they need to make sure that the companies they invest in are not going to disappear tomorrow. They need to make sure that the companies they invest in are sustainable. That means they have good governance systems. That means they're not going to be making mistakes along the way. That means that they are not going to be fined for environmental infractions. It means that they're not going to be boycotted by people because they are seen as not socially responsible. And so these investors have taken this responsibility very seriously now. 49 stock exchanges around the world and 350 large asset managers have already committed to ESG principles. 97 financial institutions in 37 countries have committed to the Equator Principles. So what are the Equator Principles, for those of you who do not know, are really the grandfathers or grandparents of the ESG. They were started a long time ago by major financial institutions around the world of saying they are not going to finance projects, especially infrastructure projects, that are nocive to the environment, that harm society or people or environment or other, the well-being of people in other ways. And so those Equator Principles are, then form the basis for developing them into other areas and other names. So ESG is like Equator Principles plus. The G20 have adopted what they call the Quality Infrastructure Investing Principles, and these are similar to the ESG principles. The United Nations especially led by the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, which was the part of the UN that was most involved in sort of PPP policy, came up with something called the People First PPP concept. And these are things that are continuing to develop. They're very similar. They're trying to find ways to make these principles more quantifiable, and so therefore we can see a move not only among the various institutions but also in the market to get ratings, to be able to quantify and analyze and prioritize and categorize all these activities. And so we can see that entities like Bloomberg, like FTSE, like Morgan Stanley, like S&P, Fitch, Moody's, they all now are doing ratings of ESG ratings. Now, but if all of that is happening, if this upheaval is taking place in the markets big time, how come we are not seeing PPP projects being impacted by the developments in ESG? And the reason is that many governments still see PPP as a tool for procurement, like I said, not a tool for development. They still look at PPP as a way to award construction contracts. They lack, many times they lack budgets for project preparation. So they have enough money to do a basic study and then to run the tender, but they do not have money to pay for environmental and social studies and assessment. And typically what they do, like when they have, let's say, a toll road project, is they say, okay, here is the project, we are going to tender it, and the contractor, before starting to build the road, they will do the environmental assessment plan. And then we will continue or not continue with the project, depending on what the contractor finds or doesn't find, or we make alterations to the route of the road accordingly. So this postponement of the environmental impact assessment, the social impact assessment, means that the projects do not qualify for ESG financing upfront, and they are missing out on these huge pools of money. I said earlier 30 trillion, but they may be as much as 40 trillion nowadays that are out there that are looking for ESG-rated projects to invest in. They tend to be, the other thing is that governments tend to be a bit cautious and treat some information confidentially and not release it. And so they are not sharing information about their projects very early on with the rating agencies in order to give the rating agencies time to study the project, assess it, ask the questions, so that they are able to rate it. And then the governments launch projects for tender without those projects being rated, and they miss out again on ESG financing. Under political pressure, many PPP projects are short-circuited. Governments, politicians make promises, we are going to do this and that, and then they want to deliver within 100 days, and they want to deliver within 6 months. And PPP projects are projects that take a long time. Sometimes they take 1.5 years, or maybe even 2 years before they are tendered. And then they may take 2 or 3 years for construction. So this concept, this approach to infrastructure that would normally be planning, projecting, taking time to do things right, especially that these are very expensive projects usually, they tend to be put under political pressure, do it quickly, forget about ESG studies, forget about environment now, I want it done. And then these projects are done and then they fail. Unfortunately, this has given a very bad reputation to PPP in many countries. And this is something which we at WAP are trying to fight against. Consulting stakeholders is another very important aspect. If you do not work with society, you build a dam where people don't want a dam. You build a road where they don't want a road. You you build a waste treatment facility where, or put a landfill where people are living nearby and they don't want it. If you don't, and this is just very simple management of expectations and consulting with stakeholders. Sometimes the stakeholders are even other government entities, not just people. They can be other government entities. They can be international donors as well. And so the governments have to internalize the concept of ESG and really believe in it. And like companies have done, like BlackRock has done, like Amundi has done, like the major insurance companies have done, they have to internalize this and see that it is in their own benefit to apply ESG. There are tools that can help governments with that. These are private sector developed tools, so that before the project is presented to a rating agency or otherwise, a government entity can analyze it and make sure that it is ESG compliant. There are many tools. I mentioned among them Envision, which is is gaining a lot of traction everywhere. It's a tool developed by the International Sustainability Institute, I believe, ISI. So you will have this presentation. I encourage you to take a look at these tools and learn more about them.
Thanks, Ziad. I need to remind you of the time because we have one more speaker.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. I will be finishing soon. These are the quality investment, infrastructure investment principles of the G20. They're the same as ESG. UNECE, like I said, it takes a slightly different approach by calling it People First PPPs. It looks at access and equity, economic effectiveness, replicability, etc. And now through WAP, we are promoting also some of the new work that has been developed by one of our members, whose name is Domingo Peñalver, works for the CNET Institute in Barcelona, and that is looking not at value for money, as most PPP projects do, not only value for people, as People First PPP and ESG requirements do, but even going one step further, as Raymond Zanner has said, to assessing the impact on future generations. And this is a tool called the DFBOM, and I encourage you to also take a look at it and learn more about it. So in conclusion, we need to use ESG and do it the right way. And ESG, at the end of the day, I know you've heard a lot of ideas today. We've talked about agriculture. We've talked about all kinds of things related to different types of PPPs, etc. But the one idea I want you to take from my presentation, if you can, is that ESG is important to get a very good financing terms, and there's a lot of financing available looking for good projects. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ziad. Sorry for hurrying you a little bit, because I wanted to at least plug in one question from the audience. And this is, let me read from Adiza Lemian Kwando. And she said, I think, well, I'm not sure. The question is, no, sorry, I lost it. Sorry, I'll be right back. I'd like you to focus on the risk of PPP of poor countries with foreign rich, strong firms. I think you have hinted on that, but it would be worthwhile to underline it and just mention a few key risks if the project preparation is either poor or skipped.
I can answer that, but the way I heard the question was different. I thought he was talking about, whether large multinational firms, what is the risk of them coming into poor countries? I don't know if I understood it correctly, but I'm happy to answer either question.
Well, I think I would like you to focus on the risk of PPP of poor. Okay, I think your interpretation is the right interpretation.
Okay. Well, I mean, it has been obviously an issue for many countries. We all have heard about the term banana republic, which comes from major banana producers, becoming so powerful within a country that they end up controlling government for their own interest. And but I think this has stayed in the memory of people, and it has stayed as something that people are concerned about. But really, the world has moved on. We're no longer in that age. We're no longer in the age of countries being reliant on only one crop or one mineral or, on extractive industries. Today, every country, even poor countries, are much more diversified than that. And they have much more intelligent leadership in this. And there's much more transparency through social media and otherwise. And so, therefore, I don't think this is a risk to stop us from looking at PPP projects with large companies in developing markets. This is a risk to be conscious of and to mitigate and to look at and consider, but not to be afraid of to the point of stopping us.
Well, so your message is very encouraging, and I think perhaps the starting point is a better conversation, dialogue, and exchange and information sharing, which you also call for the government to make their project, at least there's sort of the background thinking and some of the data more transparent and available, so that rating agencies could actually help out in quotation to promote their projects to this huge pool of resources that is underutilized. And this probably also explains the phenomenon why the economy is stagnating, in some cases is actually declining, but stock markets nevertheless continue to go up. So I cannot do justice with your wealth of knowledge and experience in this field. And I think, we need to have another session somewhere, to take it further. So with this, I thank you very much. And then I would like to invite the next speaker, who is also from the financial sector. Oops. And also from new emerging countries in East Asia. It's Vietnam. And Madame Fong Chi Nguyen, I hope I'm actually addressing her Pichai, and she is the Vice Director of International Cooperation and Communication of the bank, Vietnam Bank for Social Policies. She is currently working on many of these partnership projects, especially in the field of greening agriculture. That is a topic that she wants to talk about. She has a master's degree in finance, banking, and securities at the University de Nantes. So I assume that she also speaks very well French. So Pichai, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for your introduction. So now I would like to share my screen on our case study in terms of the providing green educator to our clients who are the last mile population who cannot access to the commerce bank. It's okay? Do you hear me now?
We can hear you very well. However, we do not see your slides. Okay, it's now coming.
So thank you for Miss Litty having me to spend some minutes to introduce and share our experience in terms of providing green agriculture for the poor household and other private.
Pichai, could you enlarge your screen because it's rather small, we cannot see.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, I would like to give a briefing on our VPSP. VPSP is a Vietnam Bank for Social Policy that is a public financial institution established by the Vietnam government to provide the inclusive finance product and service to the poor and other disadvantaged population who cannot access to commercial bank in Vietnam. To date, VPSP is the biggest microfinance provider in Vietnam and becoming one of the biggest microfinance institution in the Asian region. I have listened to the previous presentation of the expert in this meeting now, and so I determined that the partnership, especially the multi-stakeholder partnership, plays a key important role in our success of VPSP. Right being established at 2002, VPSP initiated a multi-stakeholder partnership with the public sector and the private sectors, and also the community social group and social political association in terms of delivering the microcredit to the poor and other marginal ones living in rural, remote, and island areas in Vietnam. So up to now, we established 63 municipal province branches, 629 district branches, and so we established 11,000 common mobile transaction points, and so we established over 175,000 community saving and credit groups. The partnership, we signed a contract, a trust contract with the 4 local mass organizations who are the Vietnamese Women Union, Farmer Unions, Youth Union, and Veterans Union. Yeah, who are the social political association in the community to help us in the process of delivering the green educator to the poor and other marginal ones. Up to now, we are serving over 6 million active borrowers, who are the poor, the women, micro enterprise, SMEs, the enterprise using the ethnic minority or a person with disability employees and other micro entrepreneurs in rural areas. And so our loan proposal is $10 billion, and so out of which 90% in rural agriculture. And so our default rate is under 1% in total. We are serving over 20 credit schemes, serving the national target program by the government, such as poverty reduction, job creation, financial inclusion, green growth, and climate change. And also we provide some the basic financial service for the poor and other disadvantaged populations. So in terms of the green educator to the poor and other private business households, so we are now serving nearly $5 billion, serving 3 million clients. Yeah, so as I mentioned, we are focused on the micro lending to the poor and the private household, farms, cooperatives, and micro business operating in the rural, remote, and island areas. So in terms of the green educator component, we are conducting in the PINE. That's only the first focus on the forestrations, growing the industry, food chain, and so we have a limitation, and in terms of the lending to the innovative energy solution, linking with the production and business of the client. And so this green microgreen lending scheme, yeah, we are conducted right at the 2003 up to now. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and so we provide the poor with inclusive financial service and product which are suitable with the poor, environmentally production and adaptation and mitigation to climate change. Yeah, we provide urgent loan support for the poor in climate change adaptation and mitigation. Yeah, and also the green credit program I have already mentioned in the previous slides. And so let me clarify on our partnership. That is the model of our transaction with the borrower, but in fact that is a partnership in our lending process. For example, I am the poor, and so I voluntarily join the saving and credit group. Yeah, gathering the 5 to 60 members who have a borrowing demand from PPSP, and then they are established by the support of by the mass organization to share the experience and in production and business, and also business linkage. So the saving and credit group comment and review and select which member to be eligible with the loan from PPSP, especially in terms of the green educator. And then the group leaders send the list of borrower with the loan application to the local authority. Local authority have a function in terms of the appraising the loan application of the borrower, who are the chairman person of the people committee, and also the commune poverty, and also the educator and educational development section at the local level, who take over the appraising the loan application of the client. After consideration, local authority send the group, the saving and credit group send the loan application to VPSP for checking the application validity, and also we announce the disbursement results to the local authority and mass organization, and then they inform to the group leader in terms of the disbursement results, location and time for the group member. Yeah, that is some image, some image we have interact with the customer at the transaction point, and so we work closely with local authority and mass organization to provide the business training and financial literacy to to our clients. Yeah, that is the cooperation model with the mass organization. Yeah, so the mass organization help up in terms of the communication, the lending scheme to the client, and so they help us to check the loan use and guide the member to how to use loan properly. Yeah. Yes, that is a model of saving and credit group in terms of the coordinating with PPSB to take care and orienting the clients. And so PPSB is the only bank to set up the nearly 11,000 commune transaction point at the grassroots level. And so for the venue is located at the center of the village or hamlet. And so it is a very convenient for the poor and client to come to the transaction point. And so we conduct the transaction at the commune transaction points. But during our partnership to deliver green agriculture, yeah, we also encounter with some challenge and difficulties. First of all, we have our multi-stakeholder. Yeah, for example, the local authority and local government, saving and credit group, or the mass organization, and also the poor or the private household lack information in terms of the green credit product, and so lack knowledge and technical assistance in terms of the green energy solution, adapting to the business and production, and also VPSP itself have an experience in terms of the green credit, especially in the applying the green energy solution into the agriculture and production for the private households. In Vietnam now, the legal framework on green credit is not yet completed, and so the central bank have not yet clarify the certain criteria for each green credit product, and so the government not much focus on the green micro lending during this time. So we hope that in the near in 2021 to 2023 30, the government should focus on the supporting green micro lending to the private households. Yeah, that is some needs or some lesson we need to be done to overcome this challenge. And so first of all, I think VPSP should formulate VPSP staff and leadership should understand more about the important and the knowledge of green credit, especially the green micro lending to the poor and other disadvantaged population living in rural and vulnerable communities. Even though we deliver some green agriculture credit scheme serving for the national targeted program of the government, but we have not not yet formulated the social and environmental risk management policy in our internal business system. And so we have not experience and not knowledge in terms of the greening in total operation and business. That is one of the challenge for us to improve the green educator in the next time. And also our client is the poor and other last mile population who have a limited knowledge and limited service and infrastructure. And I think so. BPSP should promote enhance the green financial literacy, not only for the bank staff but also for the group leaders, the business mentor network, and also the customer then. And so for them to understand, to get more understand about the benefits and the role of the applying the green energy solution into the agriculture for their livelihood improvement. And also I think the local authority and other mass organizations should set up access to the information system in terms of the green products. And so BPSP success to increase dialogue among the local partner in terms of our lending process. And so we must enhance the capacity building for the leadership to the grassroots level, and also the business mentor network. And in terms of green microfinance, is rather new to our in Vietnam. And so I think we should have a consultation and recommendation in terms of developing the green catalog for green microfinance. Yeah.
Pichai, I need to hurry you a bit. I'm sorry for this. Could you try to wind up in 2 minutes, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, that is some lesson to be learned for Vietnam and other country. First, we should integrate the green agriculture development goals into our business strategy in our bank, and also in socio-economic development goals of the country. And so we should enhance the close and smart coordination among the multi stakeholder. And so we enhance the communication for the client. That is some point I would like to say the experience in terms of BPSP case study. And so would you have any question? And so I'm very honored to answer.
Well, sorry for hurrying you, because we have staff working behind the scene, so I don't want to sort of go beyond the limits and keeping them sort of really meeting going into the middle of the night. And same apply for you also, even though you are 2 hours behind. So I would actually have wanted you to use 1 minute to address this question. You mentioned that the bank and your stakeholders are in general not sufficiently equipped with the understanding about green agriculture or the environmental impact of agriculture. So I'm wondering, what do you see as potential risk or vulnerability in the bank's operation?
Thank you for your question. In fact, our green educator product we are serving is either focused on the national targeted program, and so this component is related to the multi-stakeholder, and it is especially in terms of the the department or the agency of the rural and agricultural development. And so, as you know, our business mentor network, I already presented. So, I mean that at the local level, there is not a strong coordination and enhance the and strengthen the capacity building for our business mentor in terms of the green agriculture. And also we have a limited in terms of the technical and financial support. And also we lack the consultation and experts to guide us how to formulate and to develop the green agriculture for our members. And so the potential risk in our bank, I think it comes from so many aspects. First of all, so we have now developing and investing the digital financial service for the poor, because as you know, our client is very special, and so they have limited and not familiar with our digital digital banking, and so we must design and develop gradually, step by step, to enhance our capacity building in terms of the green agriculture.
Well, thank you. You know, it's like the name of the bank. It's Vietnam Bank for Social Policies. And I could see that you know, since 2013, you know, you have really sort of expanded the service, and you know, you mentioned also to remote and mountainous area where I know that the population is very scarce. And so it is a huge undertaking. And as a banking institution, I would say that in order to manage the risk and also build up the capacity, the starting point could be at the SDG 17.19, start to collect, or 18, collect some data and to start to look at, you know, where you have strong performance and where you have weaker performance. Sorry that I'm venturing into a little bit of a sort of experience sharing, because this is what I see is the first step, or experience as the first step to build up the internal capacity. I think your bank and your stakeholder groups could be stronger than you are afraid of. You know, in terms of thinking, seeing the performance of the country of the last 20 or 30 years.
Many thanks for your recommendation. And so goodbye. See you then.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I'm sorry of cutting you short. And, you know, with this, I want to thank first of all the participants who stayed with us until this moment. And then second, I want to thank the speakers of the day, starting from Miss Lota Tahinen, and then with Mr. Ahmad Mukhtar, and also Professor Raymond Saner, and Mr. Ziad Alexander Hayek, and of course, very important, it helped us to see the younger generation, Miss Phun Chai Nguyen from Vietnam. I apologize for not managing the time very well, and thank you all for excellent presentation and give us a lot of food of thought. So with that, I would like to hand it back to our director of the program, the senior advisor of UNOSD, Dr. Jean Aragon. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Just, oops.
Yeah, you are on, and
Yeah, I'm here. So first of all, I'd like to thank our moderator today, Ms. Lucia Sainer Yu, professor in organization development and institutional learning. I would also like to thank all the speakers for this session. So starting with our colleague, Ms. Lotta Tattinen, Chief of Outreach and Partnership Branch at the Division for Sustainable Development Goals at UNDESA, who gave us, through a video presentation, a great introduction on the SDG-17 and the key issues. I'd like to thank Mr. Hamad Mukhtar, economist at Trade and Food Security at the FAO in Geneva, who presented on partnership framework, FAO strategy for partnerships with the private sector and the CSOs. So Mr. Raymond Sainer, Professor, Organization and International Management at Seoul University, for his presentation on Outlook on Financing the 2030 Agenda, and Mr. Ziad Alexandre Hayek, Vice Chair of the Bureau of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, Working Party on PPP, for his presentation, Why Should PPP Practitioners Keep ESG in Mind? And finally, thank you, Ms. Fong Chin Nguyen, Vice Director, International Cooperation and Communication at the Vietnam Bank for Social Policies, who presented a project on partnership for socioeconomic development through green agriculture in Vietnam. All these presentations were very informative and somehow complemented each other very well. And they help us also to understand SDG-17. Once again, we cannot cover all the aspects of the SDG-17 in such a short time frame. This is a topic that we could spend a week or 3 or 4 days at least on that theme only. I believe that you did a really great job in only 2.5 hours of presentation and discussions to help us understand better on that theme. Then, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers and colleagues, over the past days, we have taken a remarkable journey together discussing about the high-level political forum for sustainable development and 5 of the 9 SDGs that are connected to sustainable resilient recovery from the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, and that will go under the HLPF next July. We hope that through this training course, with its 5 sessions where international experts and practitioners who share their knowledge and experience around the high-level political forum for sustainable development, the voluntary national reviews, or about their own experience and work related to specific SDGs that will go under review during the forthcoming HLPF in July this year. We have succeeded to help you understand and prepare better to actively take part in the implementation and review process of the SDGs in your own country. It's a very rare privilege to gather so many participants who are also dealing with these issues daily in their professional lives. Most of you are participants from previous executive training course editions or other UNOSD-led activities over the years. When I sent you all an invitation for this year's edition of the executive training course, I was struck by the number of people who have already participated in our activities over recent years. This means that you are part of a group which we call the UNOSD Community of Practice, where there are more than 1,000 professionals and experts working on SDGs issues in local and national governments, the UN system and academia around the world. Hence, I would like to thank you all for your active participation through your presentations, interventions, and sharing of your questions and ideas during the discussions during the week. It was unfortunate that we were not able to meet in person this year as we normally do. However, this gave us the opportunity this year to gather even more participants than we do normally, thanks to the technology which gave us the possibility to meet virtually. I'd like to thank all the speakers who shared their knowledge and experience throughout the whole week. I want to thank UNOSD consultant, Ms. Licia Sener-Yu, who helped us putting this edition of the executive training this year. She guided us during the week and also acted as a moderator for many sessions. And she did it all very professionally and a very lively and collegial atmosphere. This is also true for Professor Raymond Seiner, who was not only a presenter today, but also a moderator of a few sessions as well over the week. My special thanks go to our colleagues from UNDESA, DSG, our division, but also from other divisions at UNDESA who also shared their knowledge live or through video over the week. I would like to thank Mr. Chong-Kyu Park, our head of office, not only for delivering a very thoughtful and warm welcome message at the opening of the training course, but also for being very supportive throughout the whole preparation of this important event. I would like to thank my colleagues, staff, and interns from UNOSD, the ones who are working hard and late behind the scene, without whom this course could not take place. We look forward to your keeping in touch with us and let us know your future achievements in implementing Agenda 2030 and the SDGs in your countries. We will be highly anticipating your active participation again in the next executive training course or other related activities. We hope to welcome you in Incheon as soon as the situation allows. Many thanks again. Stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, John.
Yeah,
Bye-bye to everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Licia,
much, everybody.
Raymond,
Thank you,
John.
Mr. Park.
Okay, Licia, you have a good job. Professor Raymond also, you have a good job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank
Okay.
you all.
The very best.
Thank you.
And
Same
goodbye
on your
to
side.
everybody. Stay
Goodbye.
well, stay safe. Have a nice weekend.
Yeah, you too all.